Well, forward Tennessee basketball players have certainly found themselves in the spotlight here in the NBA Summer League. We talked about Chaz Lanier a couple of days ago. Now we get to one Jahmai Mashack, who was able to stay in state when the Memphis Grizzlies selected a Naismith Defensive Player of the Year finalist. We have Drew Hill joining us here on the show, a beat reporter for the Daily Memphian for the Memphis Grizzlies. Drew, I appreciate you joining us here on the sports page.
Yeah, thanks. It's been really fun to cover Jahmai, and Summer League's one of the most fun times of the year. So I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with the trips you've made to Salt Lake City and then to Vegas, you certainly have had a really entertaining summer so far. Of course, Jahmai Mashack playing in about a handful of those games. What's the first thing you were hoping to see when it was official that he heard his name called for the Memphis Grizzlies?
So he was advertised as sort of this defensive specialist player who's was one of the best on-ball defenders in college basketball, and obviously the Grizzlies sort of viewed that reputation as something that was legitimate, and so everybody wanted to see him play that level of defense. But I don't think anybody um, thought that he would be bad on that end of the floor, right? Like everyone thought like that we knew what Jahmai was when it came to his defensive game. So, um, he lived up to that, I think.
Yeah, so when you obviously know about his defense and all the stories that are there, I remember back when the assistant coach for Tennessee, Rod Clark, told me a story about how when they're, I think it was like in the Bahamas, and he's just laying in the on the couch in the elevator lobby, just studying film of the guy that they're about to go play. How much have you seen maybe that laser focus or oh, I could tell this guy studied film before he stepped out on the court today? How much maybe did you see of that? I know it's summer league, but could you sense that, like, oh, this is a guy who did his homework coming into this game?
Oh, I knew that was the case because I actually asked Jahmai. I said, this is a really simple, maybe stupid question, but how do you avoid a screen? Like, can you just tell me in the most basic term, like, how do you explain to me like I'm 5 years old? How do you avoid a screen? And he went into an explanation that was probably longer than 4 minutes about like
Wow.
slips and probes and all the different types of bigs and the way that they want to screen and studying your personnel and knowing who's coming and like in that moment it was so clear like that this is sort of the way he plays defense is that 99% of it is up here. um and that's I think what really impressed the Grizzlies in the first place. um, the Grizzlies identified Jahmai as a player that has a talent that's really hard to teach and even harder to find. And that is he has an amazing feel for playing defense, right? And the way it was described to me is that there's two types of defenders in the NBA. There's the ones that are really sound defensively and can play in a way where, they fit that fits within the game plan. And then there's defenders that are gamblers that take more risk that try to generate steals and other types of plays, but in doing so, do sort of compromise what you want to do defensively. And they believe Jahmai had the rare ability to do both, right? To be somebody
Wow.
that can be sound, but also gamble because he's able to recover so quickly and because he knows what's coming because he studies the game so much. So I think that's why the Grizzlies picked him. I know for a fact that's why the Grizzlies picked him. And his studying is a lot reminiscent of a player who many know who has his jersey retired by the Grizzlies, which is Tony Allen. And I think to expect Jahmai to become Tony Allen would be totally unfair to Jahmai. But I did have the chance to talk to Rick Barnes last week, and Rick coached against Tony Allen. He watched Tony Allen play a lot of games, and he said, you know what, Jahmai and Tony Allen, they have one trait in common, and that is, no matter who's playing against them, the opposing coach is going to look at what they can do on the court and say, I want that guy on my team. Um, and I think that's because those two guys really, really studied the game at a high level. So Long-winded answer for a short question, but yes, yes, you can obviously tell that he studies the game.
Maybe the way that Jahmai Mashack has played in his handful of NBA Summer League games, he's maybe showing a little bit more flash on the offensive side. You mentioned the 41% from three. I think to maybe add to that, 31% of his shots were three-pointers, and he's making 41% of those shots. And I believe it was against Atlanta, maybe where he had his best game. I think he poured in 15 some odd points in that game. What have you liked in this small sample size of maybe where he's showing that he has some promise offensively?
I like that he was asked to do something that he probably didn't think he was going to have to do coming into summer league, which was handle the ball more and play point guard because the Grizzlies didn't have Javon Small, who was their other second round draft pick for most of summer league as he dealt with a groin injury, and so they asked Jahmai to step up and do that. And honestly, the scoring's great, but the passing is also part of the offensive package, and that's where he was his best in summer league. And so I thought it was a really positive sign that they asked him to do something that maybe he didn't think he was going to do coming into summer league, be play point guard, be a creator, and he did it really well. 22 assists is a lot of assists over
Yes.
summer league games, and especially in that setting where I don't want to say players are selfish, but like everybody's trying to make a name for themselves and prove that they can play at the NBA level. So, you don't always get the best shots being taken in summer league. Yet Jahmai was able to create good shots for his teammates, and like that to me is really, really important and something that he's going to have to do if he's going to play with the Grizzlies and in the new coach Telmas Isola's system. Is he's going to have to be able to play on the ball and create for others. And for him to show that, I think that was the best part of his offensive game in Las Vegas for sure.
I'm VFL Chris Brown. Experience the VW brand proudly being produced in the great state of Tennessee. Harper Volkswagen is a proud partner of Tennessee Athletics. Go Vols.
A couple other things. I know, especially in his senior campaign at Tennessee, a lot of what he did, people would coin it as, oh, it just doesn't show up on the box score. It doesn't show up in the stat sheet. And I've heard maybe a little bit of talk during the Summer League about his offense, that he just had some really good reads offensively, and maybe that didn't convert to something that show up in the stat sheet. Maybe what jumps out at you as something, maybe even if it's just effort-wise, offensively, that maybe doesn't automatically show up on the stat sheet.
Offensively, I think that there's some athleticism there that makes you feel like he had a huge dunk at the end
Yes.
which does show up on the box score.
It sure does.
But I think that the athleticism, as he works towards what we talked about, just him needing to be more of an offensive threat, I think that that's you can see that he has the skills and the athleticism to become that type of player. I think there are at times some empty drives from him where he should shoot it around the basket a little bit more often. I know that was some of the constructive criticism that he had for himself after some of these summer league games. And so I think it's for him a matter of getting all the way to the basket and keeping the mentality of being score first at times and being a little bit more selfish at times. And I think if he does that, he'll become a better offensive player. I mean, those are things that show up on the box score. I'm not sure what wouldn't show up on the box score offensively because he's not going to be like much of a screener, but
Sure.
he has to be able to space the floor, and that's a big part of this too. Like if he's a non-threat from the three-point line, the Grizzlies are not going to ever play a lineup that has more than two guys that don't shoot threes out there. So he's got to be able to make threes to stay on the court for this team. And if he does that, then he could be a floor spacer. And then maybe he impacts the game a little bit more without showing up on the box score in that way.
I think the other thing that a lot of Vol fans maybe started to like about Jahmai Mashack is he kind of grew into this offensive type player, and I think that maybe showed a little bit of the hunger that he had. And I know during the NBA draft, I think a lot of the picks were like, oh, they're bringing a hunger that the league has missed for quite some time. How much do you see that hunger, so to speak, in Jahmai Mashack?
I mean, yeah, he was the 59th pick, which was the last pick in the draft, and at his introductory press conference, that usually that the last pick, more so for football than basketball, gets the
Mm-hmm.
tag of Mr. Irrelevant. And he said, he's going to embrace that, he's going to accept that, he's going to use it as motivation. And I think he wasn't on a lot of draft boards, but the Grizzlies saw something in him and took a chance on him, and so he has a lot to prove. And I think you're going to see that from him, over the course of his rookie year. Um, he doesn't necessarily um, have a game that is conducive to drawing global fans, if that makes sense. Like you're not going to watch him play and be like, wow, who is this guy? Like, you know, I don't suspect that he's going to have some massive fan base, but in Tennessee, he's so beloved, and in Memphis, I'm sure he's going to be so beloved, and he's already people are already really impressed from what they've seen in summer league because people really have an appreciation, I think, for the players on their team that do the little things, that do the dirty work, and that's really that have that hunger, and that is the type of player that Jahmai is. And that's honestly the type of player that this franchise has a long history of, and that's why it's grit and grind became the motto. So um, while it may not be as popular as Kevin Durant scoring 30 points, like I think Jahmai Mashack's going to have no problem finding appreciation in Memphis, and I just hope he keeps that hunger to do so.
So what I'm hearing is that there might be a couple of opportunities and ways for Jahmai Mashack to maybe get a contract with the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yeah, so the Grizzlies came into the summer league with knowing that they were going to sign Javon Small, who's the number 48 pick just before Jahmai, to a two-way contract. So each NBA team gets three packs that allows the player to play in 50 NBA games during the regular season, and then the rest of it can be played in the G League. And so the Grizzlies knew they had one point guard already signed. They knew that they needed to add a big to one of those two-way spots, which they did, and they added PJ Hall yesterday. Um, into one of those spots, and that left one spot with two players that were really competing for it: Jahmai Mashack and Zion Poland. And Zion Poland was waived in order to make a spot open for PJ Hall to sign. And then that leaves one guy left and one spot open. And it hasn't quite happened yet. I think that the Grizzlies can afford to wait if they wanted to wait a little bit longer and take this into training camp and still have more competition for the two-way spot. But based on everything that we saw from Jahmai at Summer League, he was so impressive. It just feels like he's very deserving of the spot, and it would be a surprise at this point if he doesn't get that two-way spot.
Yeah, well, hopefully, when this airs on Wednesday, it'll be maybe a near a done deal. Yes. Well, Drew, I appreciate all your time. I know you have a lot coming up at the Daily Memphian. Where can folks find you and follow your work?
Yeah, you can find me at thedailymemphian.com. I have a story over there, like I said, uh, where I spoke to Rick Barnes over the phone. Rick has been very gracious with his time for us as we've had several Vols in Memphis over the years with Eve Pons first and then Kennedy Chandler and now Jahmai Mashack. And, I thought Rick told some really great stories about Jahmai and his time at Tennessee. So you can go check that out over at the Daily Memphian. And other than that, you can just find me on social media at DrewHill_DM.
Awesome, Drew. I appreciate your time as always, and hopefully we'll be talking more Meshack as the season comes up.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.